In the depths of the Great Depression, when outlaws ruled the highways and law enforcement struggled to maintain control, one man stood apart for his sheer brutality: Babyface Nelson. Unlike his contemporaries, who often sought public sympathy or reveled in their folk hero status, Nelson was different. He was ruthless, unpredictable, and consumed by violence. While men like John Dillinger and Pretty Boy Floyd carefully cultivated their images, Nelson seemed to thrive on chaos, leaving a trail of blood and destruction across the Midwest. Babyface Nelson, too small to fear, too deadly to stop. Born Lester Joseph Gillis on December 6, 1908, in Chicago, Illinois, he grew up in a working-class neighborhood, surrounded by crime and hardship. From an early age, he was hot-tempered and reckless, a boy with an unusual ability to attract trouble. Unlike some criminals who eased into a life of crime, Nelson jumped in head first. By the age of 14, he had already been arrested for auto theft, marking the beginning of a life that would be defined by lawlessness. Despite his small stature, standing only 5 feet 4 inches, Nelson exuded a dangerous confidence that made even hardened criminals wary. His youthful face and short frame led to the nickname that would follow him forever: Babyface. But behind those boyish features was a man of unmatched ferocity, one who would soon become one of the FBI's most feared adversaries. During the 1920s, Nelson became involved in Chicago's criminal underworld, running with bootleggers and small-time gangs. He worked for the North Side Mob, hijacking liquor shipments and committing armed robberies. It was during this time that he began to develop his signature style: swift, violent, and remorseless. Unlike other criminals who saw killing as a last resort, Nelson relished it. His short temper and willingness to pull the trigger made him a liability, even among fellow criminals. In 1931, he was arrested for a bank robbery in Chicago and sentenced to Joliet Prison. But Nelson was not a man who stayed behind bars for long. Within a year, he escaped, disappearing into the criminal underground. By the time he resurfaced, he had become a seasoned outlaw, ready to carve his place among the era's most notorious bank robbers. By 1933, Nelson had assembled a gang that included John Paul Chase and Homer Van Meter. Together, they raided banks across the Midwest, striking with precision and leaving bodies in their wake. While other criminals worked to minimize violence, Nelson embraced it. If a bank manager hesitated to comply, Nelson would beat him mercilessly. If police officers got in his way, he would gun them down without hesitation. His reputation for ruthless efficiency soon caught the attention of John Dillinger, the most wanted man in America. The two joined forces, forming a powerful criminal alliance. But while Dillinger was charming and strategic, Nelson was reckless and unpredictable. The difference in their personalities became clear during the infamous Little Bohemia Lodge raid in April 1934. The gang was hiding in Wisconsin when FBI agents closed in. Dillinger and the others quietly escaped, slipping into the night. But Nelson? He charged headfirst into the fight. Armed with a .351 Winchester rifle, Nelson fired on federal agents, killing one and wounding several others. Though he managed to escape, the incident cemented his status as one of the most violent criminals in the country. From that moment on, he was no longer just a bank robber. He was a killer, and the FBI wanted him dead. Just months later, Dillinger was gunned down outside the Biograph Theater in Chicago. With Dillinger gone, Nelson took his place as public enemy number one. But instead of going into hiding, he doubled down on his attacks against law enforcement. His final stand came on November 27, 1934, near Barrington, Illinois. Nelson, along with John Paul Chase and his wife, Helen Gillis, was driving when he spotted FBI agents Samuel Cowley and Herman Hollis. For most criminals, this would have been a sign to flee. But Nelson was not like most criminals. A high-speed chase erupted, leading to one of the deadliest shootouts in FBI history. Nelson, despite being outnumbered and outgunned, charged straight into battle. Bullets tore through the air as he advanced on the agents, firing with deadly accuracy. Both Cowley and Hollis were mortally wounded, but Nelson had been hit as well. 9 bullets ripped through his body. Yet, in his final moments, he kept fighting, refusing to surrender. As his body bled out, he ordered Chase to drive. Hours later, in a safe house, he succumbed to his injuries. His body was later dumped outside a cemetery, abandoned like the many victims he had left in his wake. Unlike Dillinger or Bonnie and Clyde, Babyface Nelson never became a romanticized figure. There were no grand tales of daring escapes, no public outcry at his death. He was remembered not as a rebellious outlaw, but as a ruthless killer. To law enforcement, he was one of the most dangerous criminals of his time, a man who never backed down from a fight. To his wife, he was a loyal husband who tried to shield his family from the darkness of his world. But to history, he remains a symbol of an era when crime ruled the streets, when men like him challenged the law and met their fate in a hail of bullets. Even today, nearly a century later, the name Babyface Nelson still carries weight. A name that evokes images of gunfights, reckless violence, and a man who refused to bow to authority. His life may have been short, but his impact on American crime will never be forgotten. Thank you for watching. If you have suggestions for our next video, feel free to share them in the comments below. We'll be sure to give you an acknowledgement for your contribution.